L'Chaim, an intimate black box, immersive, small cast, actor-musician production of Fiddler on the Roof. Sounds crazy, no? Well, here in St. Louis, you might say, there are more theater artists willing to openly buck theater tradition than in certain other cities. You may ask, why change a piece of theater if it is already perfect? We change because theater is in a constant state of evolution. And how do we keep our balance? That I can tell you in one word. Vision! Sholem Aleichem! Welcome to Jack Reviews Musicals. My name is Jack and I am a musical theater superfan based in St. Louis, Missouri, and this is my YouTube channel where I share my thoughts on all of the musical productions I see in the area. I am extremely excited to talk about this one because the wonderful folks at Fly North Theatricals invited me to the opening night performance of their production of Fiddler on the Roof, playing at the Greenfinch Theatre and Dive from now until May 3rd of 2026 in a run that by the time this video is being recorded has been totally sold out. If you have not gotten a ticket for this yet, there is an in-person waitlist looking for potential openings. Go to Fly North Theatricals event page if you want more information on that. And I would encourage you to try and get on that list if you're interested, because what Fly North has here with their version of Fiddler is really quite special. It must be acknowledged that this is Fly North's annual fundraiser production for their Theater for All initiative. All of the proceeds of this are going towards Fly North's main stage production of Sweeney Todd coming this summer, as well as their totally free children's theater arm, the Starling Company, and their in-house musical theater education studio, all in the service of Fly North's mission of providing easy accessibility to theater for people of all backgrounds, regardless of age, experience, or other factors. Artistic director Colin Healy states that Fly North Theatricals mounts musicals with roles that can be played by young actors without them being strictly children's musicals. Kids are baked into the script already, but they're mostly mature stories that demand a dignified, professional mentality to be able to pull it off, because according to Healy, that is the best way to learn about professional musical theater performance. Fiddler on the Roof is no exception. I've reviewed Fiddler on the channel before, and before we get started, I want to make it apparent I am one of those fops who are complete and total sellouts for Fiddler. I love Fiddler on the Roof on its own. It's one of the greatest musicals ever made. I've seen the show twice, both of them being different productions at the Muni. I'm gonna see it again this summer when Union Avenue Opera does it. On my Letterboxd account, I have the 1971 film adaptation listed as one of my top 30 favorite films. If you're going into this knowing nothing about the show, I'll give you a rundown. The show premiered on Broadway in 1964. It's a stage adaptation of a collection of Yiddish revivalist short stories from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, written by Russian Jewish author Sholem Aleichem. The stories were adapted into script form by book writer Joseph Stein, with songs by Jerry Bach and Sheldon Harnick. The time is 1905, in Ukraine, back when it was still a part of the Russian Empire. The place is Anatevka, a Jewish shtetl on the outskirts of Kiev. This is on the eve of the Russian Revolution, back when shtetls were being destroyed by imperial pogroms. Anatevka is barely hanging on. The only thing that's holding them together is their traditions that are rooted in their Jewish faith. Everybody has a role in the town. Everybody follows set customs and rituals. Their society is heavily structured to show their constant devotion to God. The opening number, Tradition, makes it clear Anatevka's customs are the only things that give the people control over their lives. The title of the show, Fiddler on the Roof, it comes from the analogy that the people use to describe their lives, trying to scratch out a pleasant, simple tune without breaking his neck. It isn't easy. The protagonist of the story is Tevye, Anatevka's dairy farmer, and the father of 5 daughters. 3 of them are teenagers about to be married off. Zeitel, Hodel, and Hava. Marriages in Anatevka are strictly arranged, with the couples found by Yenta, the matchmaker, and then the marriages arranged by the patriarch of the family. Zeitel, the eldest, is about to be married to the wealthy yet elderly butcher Laser Wolf. Despite their considerable age gap and Laser's bland personality, Tevye only agreed to this arrangement so that his large, overworked, underpaid family of dairy farmers can finally come into some money. Tevye even has a whole I Want song about this, If I Were a Rich Man. But the day after the arrangements get made, Zeitel just completely breaks down, confessing that she actually fell in love with her childhood best friend, Motel Kamzoil, a tailor who is closer in age to Zeitel and full of personality, but poorer than Laser. Zeitel and Motel beg Tevye to give them permission to marry each other, something that Tevye is initially outraged by, being a patriarch within a strict societal code. But once he realizes that they are truly in love with each other, he relents, with unforeseen consequences, depending on who you ask, including Hodel and Hava being encouraged to marry for love as well. Hodel falls in love with Perchik, a young teacher from Kiev who is joining the burgeoning revolution. Instead of permission, Hodel and Perchik ask for Tevye's blessing, since Perchik will be returning to Kiev to partake in a protest, so they need to get married immediately. Hava falls in love with and marries Fietka, an imperial soldier occupying Anatevka. He is sympathetic to Anatevka, but he is powerless to stop the inevitable pogrom from going into effect. Theirs is a runaway marriage, since marrying outside the faith is unforgivable. We see Tevye's varying reactions to both of his daughters marrying for love, and to Anatevka potentially being destroyed. And what it all adds up to is a deeply emotional, resonant, and relevant commentary on what it means to live in a world that is not made for you. It's a hefty story with emotional and historic weight to it. But because of this, Fiddler has always been imagined as this titan of musical theater with a grand scale and a huge scope. Everything must be revered and frozen in place from the Broadway production, as it were. Like, this show is worshipped. But to be fair, I'm part of the problem. Even the Muni and Union Avenue Opera are massive performance spaces with a cast and orchestra to match that. And it presents a logistical challenge for Fly North Theatricals on the face of it. Their permanent home is the Greenfinch Theatre in Dive on Jefferson, a bar with a tiny black box space that seats a little under 100, and it can't fit a cast of 30. And normally the basement of the building is used as a space for a small combo, not a grand musical theater orchestra. So they have to get creative. And Fly North is one of those companies that doesn't get anywhere by playing it safe. They consistently hire directors with unique visions that defy expectations. Fiddler's director and choreographer Caleb Long certainly fits that bill. His solution is to have a cast of around 20, which kind of pushes the limits of the Greenfinch a little bit, focusing on the characters with the most stage presence, with only a few actors doubling up on certain parts. But the most important creative decision that he made was to have the cast all be actor-musicians, accompanying themselves in the musical numbers, playing a purely acoustic score, ranging from classic Golden Age musical theater sound to Jewish klezmer music. Tevye says in his opening monologue that every one of us is a fiddler on the roof, and Fly North took that literally, turning the entire village of Anatevka into a folk band. The fiddler is not just a mime, she's an actual fiddler, played with panache at Fly North by local violinist Fiona Brickey. Tevye, played here by Ryan Cooper, plays a bass drum representing the marching, beating heart of tradition that runs through Anatevka. He beats this bass drum in precious key moments in the show that increase in uneasiness as the pogrom becomes more inevitable. Actor-musician productions of musicals often fall into the trap of being gimmicky, just doing it to be artsy for the sake of it. The Raoul Esparza Company was criticized for this back in the day, but in this, the vision with which Caleb Long incorporated the instruments into the staging and the choreography as well was genius. The actors accompanying themselves makes the music feel diegetic to the story, that music is the heart and soul of this community. It emphasizes their bond as a village and makes the central conflict and themes of the story much more literal. Because the ensemble is the band, they feel like a community. Long was clearly emphatic about how important developing this sense of community was to make us invested in them as people. And the casting of the individual actors was quite excellent because they genuinely reflect St. Louis as a community, using the story of St. Louis to tell the story of Anatevka, emphasizing the parallel of the events of the story to events that are currently happening in the world, the United States included. Because they're performing in a black box theater, them having to give these intensely emotional acting performances, singing songs that are demanding technically, and playing the instruments of a roving band, it makes this cast Broadway caliber. The choral arrangements feel like a cast of 50 instead of 19. Tradition, Tevye's Dream, Sunrise Sunset, Anatevka. These are the songs where the ensemble harmonies were incredible. The instrumental arrangements definitely feel pulled back compared to a Broadway orchestra, but the choices of what instruments are played, in which song, by which character, feel planned out down to a science. Credit for the excellence of the music and vocals goes to musical director Colin Healy, who plays Mordka the innkeeper and conducts the ensemble, leading the band on piano, accordion, guitar, and kick drum. He's one of 4 musicians who are consistently on stage for most of the show. There's Fiona Brickey as the fiddler, of course, who also gets the chance to have fun dancing with Tevye. Josh Baumgartner portrays Nahum the beggar and plays the clarinet in a virtuoso display of playing. Bradley Rolfe doubles up as Avram, the town crier who only gives bad news, and the rabbi, Anatevka's spiritual leader, which is cleverly represented by the rabbi being the percussionist, of which Rolfe is incredibly talented, playing the glockenspiel, the cymbal, the tambourine, the cowbell, Tevye's bass drum, and even a washboard, which, by the way, gets used for its actual intended purpose in one scene. It was very amusing. The level of musicianship from this cast was overall excellent. For the entire ensemble to be able to pull this off, I have to say, mazel tov. Despite the seriousness of the material, you can tell from the energy of this cast that they are having the time of their lives doing this. Everybody has chemistry with each other, they all support each other as a band, and they worked really hard with director Caleb Long to craft these characters into real people that you relate to, that you root for, that you love to hate. This cast has varying ages and varying levels of theater experience, but their cohesion as a company of actor-musicians is unmatched. These are all consummate performers, professionals at the peak of their powers, every single one of them. But that's just the ensemble as a whole. I want to start talking about individual creative choices now. First is Caleb Long's movement vocabulary, which was never clunky for a second. The transitions from each scene, for one thing, were buttery smooth, as the cast were wheeling in the props and the furniture that Long designed as well. He also designed the set alongside Bradley Rolfe and Colin Healy, with the scenic painting done by Katie Orr. All 4 of these people worked together to create a rather unobtrusive visual vocabulary too. The backdrop is a wall of wooden planks with flats set in front of it to make it look like the facade of Anatevka, with the flats themselves being constructed from smaller planks that had the really cool touch of having traditional Jewish prayer mezuzahs affixed to them. The importance of these comes more towards the end, but it was a cool design choice. Only a black box theater like the Greenfinch could pull that off. This was something about Jewish culture that I had not known about previously, with the added bonus of making Anatevka look like a community being held up by spare parts. On the floor in front of the audience is a painted barrier between them and the stage, made to resemble a prayer rug, almost like it's making the phrase, "the theater is a temple," and applying it to Anatevka. Even the seating at the Greenfinch is cobbled together from any chair that they could find, including the use of sofas. It gives the show a grassroots, homegrown feel, like the people of Anatevka built the Greenfinch specifically so they can put this on. Again, having 19 actors on the Greenfinch stage kind of pushes its limit a little bit, but the blocking was never overcrowded or choppy. The show was almost 3 hours long, but it's tightly paced. You never feel the runtime. It feels like you're watching a 2-hour movie with an intermission, though I will warn you, when you get up out of your seat at intermission, your body will make you realize just how long you've been sitting. It keeps you on the edge of your seat pretty much from the start. Tradition hits the ground running with this concept. Long did a great job of using tradition as a way to establish the rules of the night, getting around the hurdle of staging the thing by having the cast mingle with the audience more often. For instance, in tradition, the actors will ad-lib conversations with a random person in the crowd. At the opening night performance, I was actually approached by Perchik, who was played in this production by Henry Schumacher. We had a conversation together where he complimented my glasses. It was quite fun. Long developed the dance vocabulary alongside assistant choreographer Maggie Nold, and they worked together to translate the dance perfectly to this small venue. The dances that the young couples do together are graceful and youthful in energy. The bottle dance during Zeitel and Model's wedding was performed by the male ensemble, and they didn't cheat. They used real weighted bottles to balance on their heads. And a couple bottles did fall on opening night, and it shows that they didn't cheat. They were committed to authenticity with this. If I Were a Rich Man got a mid-song applause at Tevye's iconic shimmy to life, featured opportunities from the musicians to get solos in the spotlight, with only the real dancing coming from Ryan Cooper as Tevye, Ken Holler as Laser Wolf, and Kieran Thompson as Fiedka. Tevye's Dream was thrillingly staged, with the ensemble encroaching on them, smoke filling the stage, Ryan Thorpe's lights creating a nightmarish experience, turning into flashing strobes at the emergence of Fruma-Sarah, the ghost of Laser's long-dead wife, played with gleeful menace by Sarah Landsberger, and puppeteered by the cast. Yes, puppeteered. One of the more outstanding props in the show is a large linen tapestry that serves multiple purposes throughout the story. In Tevye's Dream, it goes from being the shared blanket of Tevye and his wife Golda to Fruma-Sarah's long skeletal arms that the cast puppeteered to taunt and attack Tevye and Golda. It serves as the tablecloth of the Sabbath prayer. Another vocally excellent moment that I forgot to mention, I always forget about the Sabbath prayer. It's later used as the wedding canopy for Zeitel and Montel during sunrise sunset, and serves as the symbolic chain of solidarity in the community, used in increasingly foreboding ways. Funny, the tapestry is always used during songs where the harmonies and the movement are haunting or chilling, solemn even. Maybe if the bass drum is the symbol for the steadiness and consistency of tradition, the tapestry is the symbol of the pride that comes with it. Credit to sound designer L.P. Gooderman for making the vocals sound crispy, by the way, perfectly balancing the voices with the acoustics of the instruments. So let's talk about the design a little bit more. Going back to Ryan Thorpe's lights for a second, the lights in the rest of the show were great. During the moments where Tevye's daughters challenge their father's authority, there's this bright, dreamy lighting. Far From the Home I Love has this cold, depressing blue. Havala has this forlorn, nostalgic magenta hue, and there's a blending of all of these techniques in the finale. The costumes by Jen Bloom Tatara were unique from other fiddlers I've seen, making the clothes that cast wear, though still in line with tradition, totally distinct. A lot of fiddlers make the mistake of making the villagers look the same and kind of act the same, but in this, you never have a hard time telling which character is who. All of these actors are interesting looking people, some of them wearing more anachronistic costume pieces. Mendel, the rabbi's son, wears Converses that are emblazoned with the Star of David, and Huddle wears a trendy, bright blue and purple blouse, short skirt, and moccasin combo. And both of these fits speak to who these characters are. The women's headscarves are all unique, some of them even have a hand knit look to them. The caps on the men are not just flat caps or kippas or samets even. Montel wears a baseball cap, Mordka wears a knit beanie. In fact, it's actually Mordka's costume in the show that inspired my fit for this review. Nakum has a bobble cap, Laser wears a shirt that's bright red, Zeitel's is bright yellow, Hava's magenta dress was a terrific find. The Constable, who ushers in the pogrom, wears a trench coat, Fiedka wears a Cossack uniform. The patterns, the textures, the colors, the styles on the clothes were so memorable, so full of character, the most distinct that I've seen in a production of Fiddler. And those are the descriptors that I would use for each and every one of the 19 cast members, and you best believe I am shouting out all of them. This cast worked so hard to make these portrayals as good as they are, especially with the technical demands of the music. Nobody is going to get left behind. I already shouted out the primary musicians. They're great. Nothing about that is changing. But let's talk about Ryan Cooper as Tevye. His expressions and intonations are high and bold. His voice is clear. His movement makes us see his character in all of his dimensions. His jokes, his wit, his misquoting of the good book, they're perfectly timed and delivered, but performed realistically, like a dad making an attempt at humor. His arc from a jovial working man yearning for a better life to an angry man being challenged by the world around him and by his own family was devastating to see unfold. You can look at Cooper's face and just see how torn apart Tevye is. You feel the joviality in Tradition, If I Were a Rich Man, to Life, but the form in which Cooper portrays Tevye's anger at the end of Act 1, and the reactions to Hava marrying Fiedka, and to the pogrom finally happening, is like a smolder. His anger is so understated that when he does explode, you could hear a pin drop in the theater. One of my favorite moments of acting from Cooper is Do You Love Me, the song where Tevye asks Golda, his wife of 25 years, if she loves him or not. You look at Cooper's face, you can feel those 25 years of pure longing, made even more potent by the chemistry with Rachel Bailey as Golda. I've made a comment about Bailey before that she fits right into the mold of the great Broadway divas of yesteryear. Golda is a role that further cements her place in that mold. Bailey herself actually stated that Golda was a dream role for her since she was 9 years old. Like, this is a role that she was practically born to play, and she does not disappoint. Bailey's Golda had a great comic timing, with sharp movements and brash inflections, making you feel the long years of hard work Golda has gone through. But Bailey does a great job of clarifying Golda's character arc, starting the show as being abrasive and no nonsense, but by the end, she becomes this resolute mother and wife who will do anything to keep her family together, but never sappy. Even at the start of Tevye's dream, she starts as rather droll, but then by the end, she feels the real fear that is needed for the number to work. She gave a fully realized performance, in addition to being a virtuoso on guitar. Her and Cooper share a nice little fantasy tango during If I Were a Rich Man, with her guitar as support. Jade Cash as Zeitel and Milo Garlich as Montel, the older of the young ensemble, both capture very well the nervous energy of their young love. Cash gives Zeitel a rebel's edge to her, giving her section of Matchmaker a playful zest. But there are cracks of vulnerability in there, particularly when Montel is involved. Cash cleverly doubles as Grandma Zeitel in Tevye's dream, playing her with an exaggerated old babushka persona that was fun to watch. Garlich's model was a delight. Montel's anxiousness in their voice and physicality was tightly wound enough through Garlich's portrayal to be comical, but also relatable when they stand up for themselves and their love for Zeitel. Garlich's rendition of Miracle of Miracles was effervescent, like that of a long incubated egg finally cracking. Garlich also has a sweet dynamic with Maggie Nold as Mottle's doting mother, Shandell, who also plays the flute in the ensemble. Next we have the older teenagers, Danielle Singleton as Hodel and Henry Schumacher as Perchik. Their dynamic was a really interesting enemies to lovers subplot. Singleton plays Hodel as a mini Golda, with a sharp tongue that does not tolerate Perchik's radical attitude. Singleton's delivery of Hodel's takedowns were front-loaded with sass. Such a fresh characterization, it screams second sister energy. Schumacher does well to accentuate Perchik's revolutionary spirit and passion for teaching, but also a little bit of pigheadedness, as demonstrated by his growing infatuation with Hodel. Their growth as a couple was pretty realistically portrayed, particularly with Singleton opening up more emotionally in Act 2 as she lets Hodel start to believe in the revolution herself. Together, their performance of Now I Have Everything was romantic and hopeful, but then that gives way to Singleton's achingly, refreshingly real performance of Far From the Home I Love. For Danielle Singleton to be a teenager and yet have this ability to portray this raw sadness and sing it with such clarity while getting the emotion across, it's astounding. Watch out for Danielle Singleton's name in the future. Zoe Cleavorn plays Hava, and Cleavorn is one of my favorite local youth performers. She actually played one of Tevye's two younger daughters in the Muni's 2024 Fiddler. Her work across St. Louis theater has been consistently good, and Hava feels almost like a culmination of everything that she has learned up to this point, going from shy bookishness at the start of the show to the naivete of finding a kindred spirit from the wrong side of the tracks, and finally to despairing devastation. One of my absolute favorite moments in this production was Havala. Instead of Hava doing a dream ballet in Tevye's mind as is done normally, Fly North has her accompanying Tevye on piano. Her piano playing made Havala all the more emotional, and her character so much more sad. There is one other key moment where Cleavorn plays the piano, which I am not going to spoil, but just to let you know, when it happened, I did tear up, but that's not even to mention Fiedka, who is played by 13-year-old Kieran Thompson. Thompson makes Fiedka's sympathies with Anatevka known pretty much straight away from his first appearance in To Life. Thompson portrays Fiedka as probably the most in tune with his emotions that I have seen, down to his vulnerability around Hava. His energy around Scott MacDonald as the constable is akin to a kid who is pretty nice deep down, but is forced by his dad to be a bully. MacDonald, who supports the music with a second piano that he plays off stage, he portrays the constable as being more aloof and authoritative, making his anti-Semitism extremely serious. Like, the things that he says to insult Tevye to his face is not funny. Even the manner in which he and Fiedka trash the wedding at the end of Act 1 is very drawn out and extremely calculated, with each decision on what to destroy next feeling more psychologically terrorizing than the last. Thompson and MacDonald's chemistry with Tevye is a true study in contrast in the types of anti-Semitism in the Russian Empire. Oh, I forgot to mention, Thompson also aces the long note at the beginning of his solo into Life. With a voice that good, at 13, definitely going places, that's for sure. Ken Haller plays Laser Wolf, and he does a really good job playing the socially awkward side of this character. Haller really makes you feel like, despite Laser's age, that he just feels totally lost. The way he teeters around the stage, his interactions with Tevye, the way Haller portrays Laser's nervousness and uptightness was very clear, making him being more open in both To Life and in the wedding scene much more dramatic. And his final little moments more tragic. Sarah Landsberger, who I mentioned earlier, plays not just Frumisera, but also Yenta the matchmaker. That's her primary role. Landsberger is much younger than most actors who play this character, so she portrays Yenta not as this doddering babushka, but instead as this intentionally conniving busybody. The kind of controlling woman who knows everything about everybody, trying to manipulate people to get them under her thumb. It makes the ensemble number, The Rumor, much more hilarious in context, and her line deliveries in the rest of the show turn Yenta into a character that we love to hate. Despite that, though, Yenta's final line in the show does get your heartstrings pulled. At least mine did. Landsberger also plays the auxiliary percussion that is not already covered by Bradley Rolfe. The shaker, the wood blocks, the slapstick, and the vibroslap. Those instruments also get played intermittently by the 3 young children in the cast. Something that I forgot to mention, before the show begins, when they're doing the pre-curtain speech promoting the Theater for All initiative, they have the kids come out holding up poster boards with this QR code where they give you an opportunity to scan it and head to the donation page for Theater for All. Because again, this production has no projector since it's almost purely acoustic settings here. First, we have 3rd graders Annie Miller as Sprinza and Lacey Irby as Bielka. They are both cute as a button. They even straight up say it at the beginning. While they're holding up the QR codes, they say, "Hey, look at us, we're adorable, give us money, please." Even at such a young age, both of these little girls were fantastic. They were professional level in their support as ensemble members, particularly during Matchmaker, the Sabbath Prayer, and Sunrise Sunset. The real standout of the kids, though, is Callum Thompson as Mendel, the rabbi's son. This role is typically played by a young man, but Bradley Rolfe, who plays the rabbi, is in his mid-30s, so for this, it makes more sense to be played by a 10-year-old boy. And Thompson just takes that concept and runs with it. His Mendel is a laugh riot, being this bratty smart aleck who thinks he knows everything. Him correcting Tevia's misquotings of the good book are hilarious. But Thompson does well to emphasize that, well, Mendel's still a kid, as evidenced by his real fear at the end of Act 1 that was really sad to watch, as well as his hilariously panicky meltdown during The Rumor. How long have I been recording this? An hour and a half! Okay, I think I've talked about everything. This has gone far enough. Fly North Theatricals' production of Fiddler on the Roof was simply rapturous. A thrill ride from start to finish. A beautiful, gripping production. Fly North has taken what many think of as this old chestnut of musical theater and completely cracked it open. Just like the 3 daughters did to Tevye, Fly North blasted through our biases on Fiddler, challenged our preconceptions of it, demanding us to see Fiddler not as this museum artifact that needs to be perfectly preserved, but rather this living, breathing piece of art. Confession time. I have actually been wanting a theater company to do a black box actor-musician Fiddler on the Roof for years now. Probably since the beginning of the 15 years that I have been taking my musical theater fandom seriously. Fly North fulfilled a fantasy for me. If you've already bought a ticket to this show and are just as excited to see it as I was, this is going to meet your expectations and then some. If you can't get a ticket, but you want to go in person to the Greenfinch this week. Sign up for the wait list. If you can get in, the wait will be worth every minute. If you're watching this video just to hear me talk about musical theater, me being passionate about it, and you're the kind of person who's like, Fiddler's not really a musical for me, go see this anyway. Please. This will blow you away. It'll make you see the show in a whole new light. It certainly did for me. This ruined all other Fiddlers for me. This was life-changing, paradigm-shifting. This is an example of a musical theater production that reminds me why I love musicals, and reminds me why it exists, and why musical theater should continue to exist as an art form. Fiddler on the Roof is a musical about the complexities of trying to stay true to yourself in a changing world, changing to the point where it starts to become inaccessible to you. This is a story that we need to carry with us, and that we need to share with people like what I'm doing right now, recommending you to go see this so that you don't feel alone if you happen to have lost hope in the current state of our world, something that is very easy to do. Trust me, I would know. This is flavored water, by the way. Stay hydrated, kids. Especially those of you in this production's ensemble. This is easily one of the best musical theater performances that I have ever had to review. Even better than the Muni's Fiddler, which I realize are fighting words, so I think I'm gonna call it. Now I want to hear from you. If you've seen Fly North Theatricals' production of Fiddler on the Roof, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any more St. Louis musical theater reviews coming soon. Thank you so much to Fly North Theatricals for inviting me to their opening night of Fiddler. I had an absolute blast, and I cannot wait for Sweeney Todd. And thank you so much for watching. Until next time, long live the musical. To life.